Before we begin, imagine this. A powerful duke is marching with 10,000 soldiers through a deadly snowstorm. The kingdom's future hangs in the balance. Nothing can stop his army until he sees a lone woman dressed in black, standing silently in the snow. She isn't afraid. She doesn't move. And with a single warning, she changes the fate of an entire kingdom. Who is this mysterious widow? How did she know a disaster was coming? And why does the royal crest of a murdered queen hang around her neck? What the Duke discovers will uncover a secret buried for 20 years, a secret powerful enough to destroy a king, ignite a civil war, and place a forgotten heir back on the throne. Stay with me until the very end, because every chapter reveals shocking betrayals, dangerous conspiracies, unexpected romance, and a truth that no one saw coming. And if you love powerful Duke stories filled with mystery, revenge, hidden identities, and unforgettable endings, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next epic story. Now, let's begin. Winter had swallowed the northern roads of Valoria. For weeks, relentless storms had battered the kingdom's frontier, turning once busy trade routes into frozen wastelands. Snow covered the mountains, the forests, and the valleys in a thick white blanket that seemed endless. The sky itself appeared lifeless. Gray clouds hung low over the land, casting shadows over the frozen earth. Most people had retreated behind stone walls and warm fireplaces, but Duke Adrian Blackthorne had no such luxury. At the age of 32, Adrian was already considered one of the most feared military commanders in the kingdom. Tall, broad-shouldered, and battle-hardened, he had spent most of his adult life fighting the crown's enemies. His victories had earned him respect. His ruthlessness had earned him fear, and his loyalty to the throne had earned him the king's trust. Now, that loyalty was being tested once again. A rebellion had erupted in the northern territories. Several noble houses had refused to pay taxes. Villages had begun openly defying royal authority. Rumors of rebellion spread through every corner of the kingdom. The king wanted the uprising crushed immediately, and so Adrian had been sent north with 10,000 soldiers. No one doubted he would succeed. No army in Valoria could stand against him. The rebels knew it. The nobles knew it. Even Adrian knew it. The campaign was expected to last only a few weeks. Afterward, he would return home to Blackthorne Castle and continue the quiet life he secretly preferred. At least, that had been the plan. Fate had other ideas. The Duke sat atop his massive black stallion, his thick fur cloak whipping violently in the wind. Snowflakes stung his face like tiny needles. Ahead of him marched rows upon rows of soldiers. Thousands of armored men moved through the storm like a steel river. Their banners snapped violently in the wind. Their boots crunched against the frozen road. Despite the terrible weather, morale remained high. Most expected victory. Some were already discussing how they would spend their reward money. Others joked about returning home as heroes. Only Adrian remained silent. Something about the storm bothered him. The weather had grown worse with every passing hour. Visibility had dropped dangerously low. Even the mountain guides appeared uneasy. His second in command, General Marcus Thorne, guided his horse alongside him. "We should make camp before nightfall, Your Grace." Adrian glanced toward the mountains. Towering cliffs loomed through the snowfall like giant ghosts. "No," Adrian replied. "We're losing time." Marcus frowned. "The men are exhausted. They'll survive." The general wisely said nothing more. Years of service had taught him when to argue and when to remain silent. The march continued. 1 hour passed, then another. The storm grew stronger. Snow swirled across the road in thick waves. The world became white, endless white. Then suddenly, a shout came from the front lines. The column slowed. Confusion spread through the ranks. Moments later, the entire army stopped. Marcus cursed under his breath. "What now?" A captain rode back through the snow. His face was pale. Your Grace. What is it? The captain hesitated. You should see for yourself. Adrian narrowed his eyes. Without another word, he spurred his horse forward. The soldiers parted as he approached the front. What he saw made even him freeze. A woman stood in the middle of the road, alone, completely alone. The snowstorm raged around her, yet she did not move. She wore a long black dress, hidden beneath a heavy cloak. A dark veil concealed her face. Her hands rested calmly at her sides. She appeared completely unafraid. It was unnatural. Any ordinary person would have been terrified. 10,000 armed soldiers stood before her, yet she remained motionless, as though she had been waiting for them. The soldiers whispered nervously. Some crossed themselves. Others muttered prayers. One young soldier quietly whispered, "Is she a ghost?" The question spread quickly. Within moments, dozens of men were staring at the woman with fear. Even Marcus looked unsettled. This is madness. He pointed toward her. Remove her. Several soldiers immediately stepped forward. Before they could reach her, Adrian raised his hand. The men stopped. For reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to speak with her himself. The Duke slowly rode forward. Snow crunched beneath his horse's hooves. The woman remained still, closer, closer, until only a few feet separated them. For several seconds, neither spoke. The wind howled between them. Then the woman slowly lifted her head. Though Adrian still couldn't see her face beneath the veil, he felt an unexpected chill crawl down his spine. Not fear, something stranger, recognition, as though he had seen her somewhere before, though he knew that was impossible. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, soft, yet somehow it carried clearly through the storm. If you continue north today, every man behind you will die. Silence followed. Then laughter erupted among the soldiers. Several men openly mocked her. Others shook their heads. Marcus rolled his eyes. A fortune teller. The generals laughed. One captain sneered. Perhaps she thinks she's a prophet. But Adrian didn't laugh. He kept studying her. Something felt wrong. Or perhaps strangely right. The woman showed no emotion. No fear. No hesitation. Only certainty. Who are you? Adrian asked. The woman remained silent. I asked who you are. Still no answer. The Duke's patience began to fade. Then something caught his attention. A silver chain hung around her neck. At the end of the chain rested a crest. His eyes widened. Impossible. The symbol was unmistakable. A silver phoenix surrounded by a crown. The royal crest of Queen Isabella, the murdered queen. The queen who had died 20 years ago during one of the bloodiest nights in Valorian history. Adrian had been a child then, but everyone knew the story. The queen's entire family had been slaughtered. No survivors, no heirs, no witnesses. The massacre had reshaped the kingdom, and the crest had disappeared forever. Until now. 1,000 questions flooded Adrian's mind. How did she possess it? Where had she found it? Why wear it openly? Before he could ask, the woman spoke again. Turn back. Adrian started. Why? The mountain is already breaking. Marcus scoffed. Ridiculous. But the woman continued. The snow above the northern pass is unstable. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. The woman pointed toward the mountains. If your army enters the pass before tomorrow, none of you will leave alive. Her certainty disturbed him. She wasn't guessing. She wasn't pleading. She was warning him, as though she already knew. Marcus rode closer. Your Grace, this is nonsense. The other officers agreed. We've already lost enough time. The rebellion grows stronger every day. We cannot delay because of some mad woman. Adrian remained silent. Logic told him they were right. Everything about this situation sounded absurd. Yet something deep inside him refused to ignore her. His instincts had saved him countless times on the battlefield, and those instincts were screaming now. The Duke made his decision. We stopped. The officers stared. Marcus blinked. What? We make camp here. Your Grace, that's an order. The general looked horrified. The soldiers immediately began setting up camp. Whispers, spread through the army. Some thought the Duke had lost his mind. Others believed the woman must be a witch. Many simply didn't understand. As night fell, Adrian sat alone inside his command tent. Outside, the storm continued. His thoughts remained fixed on the woman. Who was she? Why did that crest seem genuine? And why couldn't he shake the feeling that their meeting had been destined? Hours passed. Sleep never came. Then morning arrived. The storm finally began to clear. The army prepared to resume the march. Adrian stepped outside. The mysterious woman remained under guard nearby. She looked exactly as she had the day before. Calm, silent, watching. Then suddenly, the earth trembled. A distant roar echoed through the mountains. Every soldier froze. The sound grew louder and louder and louder until the entire world seemed to shake. The soldiers turned toward the northern pass, their faces filled with horror. En avalanche. A massive wall of snow crashed down the mountainside. Trees snapped like twigs. Entire sections of rock disappeared beneath the white wave. The destruction continued for several minutes. Then silence returned. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The pass was gone, completely buried. Had they continued marching yesterday, every man would have been trapped beneath thousands of tons of snow. 10,000 soldiers, dead. Adrian stared at the destruction. A cold chill swept through him. Not from the weather, from realization. The woman had been right. Every single word. Slowly, he turned toward her. She was already looking at him. For the first time, he sensed sadness behind the veil. Not triumph, not satisfaction. Sadness, as though she carried burdens far heavier than anyone realized. At that moment, Duke Adrian Blackthorne understood one thing. The woman standing before him was no ordinary widow. She was a mystery, a dangerous mystery. And somehow, she had just changed the course of his life. Though neither of them knew it yet, this meeting in the snow would soon uncover secrets buried for 20 years. Secrets powerful enough to shake the throne itself and bring an entire kingdom to its knees. The journey back to Blackthorne Castle took 3 days. 3 long days through frozen roads and endless snowfall. Yet, throughout the journey, the mysterious woman remained silent. She spoke only when absolutely necessary. She never complained, never asked questions, never explained how she had known about the avalanche. And no matter how many times Adrian tried to learn more about her, she revealed nothing. The soldiers watched her constantly. Some feared her, others respected her. After all, she had saved 10,000 lives. Without her warning, every man marching north would have been buried beneath the mountain. Even the officers who had mocked her now kept their distance. No one knew what to make of her, but Adrian couldn't stop thinking about her. Each night, he found himself staring into the fire, replaying their encounter on the snowy road. The calm certainty in her voice, the strange sadness hidden beneath her veil, and most of all, the royal crest around her neck. The symbol should not have existed, not after 20 years, not after the massacre. Yet there it was, real, impossible, and somehow connected to her. The mystery consumed him. By the time the towers of Blackthorne Castle appeared on the horizon, Adrian had made up his mind. He would uncover the truth. No matter where it led, the castle gates opened. Hundreds of servants hurried to welcome their duke home. The fortress stood proudly atop a rocky hill, overlooking the valley below. Massive stone walls surrounded the estate. Watchtowers guarded every entrance. Blackthorne Castle had never fallen in battle, and Adrian intended to keep it that way. As the soldiers entered the courtyard, curious eyes immediately turned toward the woman dressed in black. Whispers spread. Questions followed, but no answers came. Adrian personally escorted her inside. Marcus walked beside them. The general's suspicion had only grown. I still don't trust her. Adrian glanced at him. Neither do I. Then why bring her here? The Duke looked ahead. Because she's hiding something. Marcus snorted. That's obvious. No. Adrian's voice hardened. She's hiding something important. The woman remained silent, but Adrian noticed her fingers tighten briefly around the edge of her cloak, as though she understood every word. A few minutes later, they entered Blackthorne Castle's council chamber. A large fire burned in the stone hearth. The room quickly filled with trusted advisors, military officers, and household officials. Everyone wanted answers. The mysterious woman stood alone in the center of the chamber. Her black veil still concealed her face. For several moments, silence filled the room. Then Adrian spoke. "You saved my army." The woman nodded. "You knew the avalanche was coming." Another nod. "How?" She hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her posture. The room waited. Finally, she slowly reached up and removed her veil. The reaction was immediate. Several people gasped. Others stared in shock. She was beautiful, not in the delicate way noble ladies often were. Her beauty carried strength, grace, and sadness. Long dark hair framed a face that seemed carved from elegance itself. Yet her eyes revealed something deeper. Years of loneliness, years of loss, years of secrets. Adrian suddenly understood why she had seemed familiar. She resembled someone he had seen long ago. Un portrait, a memory from childhood. The late Queen Isabella. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same eyes, the same features, the same quiet dignity. The realization struck him like lightning. Before he could speak, the woman finally broke her silence. "My name is Elena. My name is..." The room remained quiet. Then she continued, "Lady Elena Ashbourne." The world seemed to stop. Several advisors nearly fell from their chairs. Marcus swore under his breath. One elderly noble looked as though he had seen a ghost. "Ashbourne," someone whispered. "Impossible." The Ashbourne name had not been spoken openly in years. Not since the massacre. Not since the bloodiest night in Valorian history. 20 years earlier, Queen Isabella and her entire family had supposedly been murdered. The Ashbourne bloodline had been erased. Every member dead. At least, that was what the kingdom had been told. Elena calmly met their shocked expressions. "I know what you've heard." Nobody interrupted. "I know what history claims." She reached beneath her cloak. Instantly, several guards tensed. Adrian raised a hand. "Let her continue." Elena slowly removed a small leather bundle. Its edges were worn with age. Carefully, she placed it on the table. Then she untied the leather straps. Inside were dozens of letters. Old letters, protected for many years. The room fell silent again. Elena picked up the first one. "This was written 23 years ago." She handed it to Adrian. His eyes scanned the page. Immediately, his breathing slowed. The handwriting was unmistakable. Elegant, royal. The signature at the bottom froze his blood. Queen Isabella, the real queen, the murdered queen. The room erupted. Impossible. Forgery. This can't be real. Adrian ignored them. He continued reading. Every detail appeared authentic. Every seal matched royal records. Every signature was genuine. The Duke looked up. "Where did you get these?" Elena's eyes softened. "My mother." The room grew quiet. These letters were written to her. She reached for another document. Then another. Then another. Dozens of letters. Years of correspondence. Years of friendship. Years of hidden truth. The evidence became overwhelming. No forgery could have recreated so much detail. No fraud could have maintained such consistency. One by one, doubt disappeared. The letters were real, which meant Elena was telling the truth. And if she was telling the truth, everything the kingdom believed about the massacre might be a lie. Adrian leaned forward. "What exactly are you saying?" Elena took a slow breath. Then she revealed the truth. "My mother was Queen Isabella's younger sister." The room froze. Every face turned pale. Every voice disappeared. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Marcus whispered, "My God." Elena continued, "When the massacre happened, my mother escaped with me." Adrian's heart pounded. "We ran." Her voice remained steady. "We hid." Her hands trembled slightly. We watched as the kingdom buried the truth. The room listened in stunned silence. My mother spent her entire life protecting me. A shadow crossed her face. Before she died, she gave me the letters. The pain in her eyes became impossible to miss. She told me who I truly was. Adrian slowly understood. The avalanche, the crest, the resemblance. Everything suddenly made sense. Elena Ashbourne wasn't merely a survivor. She wasn't merely a noble woman. She wasn't merely connected to the royal family. She was the royal family, the last surviving heir, the rightful heir to the throne. The realization shook the room. If Elena's claim became public, the entire kingdom would be thrown into chaos. The current king's legitimacy would immediately be questioned. Powerful nobles would take sides. Civil war could erupt, and Elena herself would become the most hunted woman in Valoria. Adrian understood the danger instantly. His gaze hardened. Who else knows? Elena hesitated, then answered softly, I hope nobody. The room exchanged uneasy looks. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? A flicker of fear appeared in Elena's eyes. For the first time, real fear. My mother always believed they were watching. Silence followed. Who? Adrian asked. The men responsible for the massacre. The room grew colder. Elena continued. She believed they never stopped searching. A chill ran through Adrian because he suddenly realized she might be right. People capable of murdering an entire royal family would never leave loose ends. Never. Which meant someone had probably been hunting Elena for 20 years. Waiting, watching, searching. The thought was horrifying. Adrian stood. Until we know more, you remain here. Elena looked up. You would protect me? The Duke answered immediately. Yes. For the first time, genuine surprise appeared on her face. Perhaps nobody had protected her before. Perhaps nobody had believed her before. But Adrian did. Not because he trusted her completely. Not yet. But because the evidence demanded it. And because something deep inside him refused to abandon her. Unfortunately, fate had already moved faster than both of them realized. Far away in the capital city, inside the royal palace, another conversation was taking place. The king sat upon his throne. Gold gleamed around him. Servants stood silently against the walls. His chief advisor entered the chamber, carrying a sealed report. The advisor knelt. Your Majesty. The king frowned. What is it? The man handed him the document. The king's eyes moved across the page. Then his expression darkened. Dangerously. His fingers tightened around the parchment. The room fell silent. Finally, he spoke. Are you certain? Yes, Your Majesty. The king slowly rose from his throne. Anger flashed in his eyes. After 20 years, the advisor lowered his head. It appears she survived. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then the king crushed the parchment in his fist. A cold smile appeared on his face. The kind of smile that frightened even his closest allies. Then we finish what should have been finished long ago. The advisor swallowed nervously. Shall I send soldiers? The king's voice became ice. No. He turned toward the window overlooking the capital. Soldiers attract attention. His eyes narrowed. Send assassin. Back at Blackthorne Castle, Helena stood beside the fire, unaware that her greatest enemy already knew she was alive. The truth she had protected for 20 years had finally emerged. The rightful heir had returned, but so had the dangers that once destroyed her family. And somewhere in the darkness, killers were already coming. The game for the throne had begun, and before it ended, blood would once again stain the kingdom of Valoria. The attack came 4 nights later. Blackthorne Castle stood silent beneath a moonless sky. Winter clouds covered the stars. A bitter wind swept across the frozen valley. Most of the castle slept peacefully. The guards patrolled the walls. Servants rested in their quarters. Even the soldiers, stationed within the fortress, had begun to relax. The avalanche had delayed the campaign. The rebellion in the north seemed less urgent now. Life inside the castle had slowly settled into a routine. But danger was already moving Through the darkness, far beyond the walls, hidden among the trees, 12 figures waited, dressed entirely in black, faces concealed, weapons coated with poison. The king's hunters, elite assassins, men trained from childhood to kill without hesitation. To the kingdom, they didn't officially exist. No records carried their names. No witnesses survived their missions. When the king wanted someone erased, he sent them. And tonight, they had only one objective: kill Elena Ashbourne. Leave no witnesses. One of the assassins studied the castle through the darkness. The girl is inside. Another nodded. The advisor wants confirmation. The leader unsheathed a thin, curved blade. You'll have it before dawn. The group silently separated, like shadows, like ghosts. Moments later, they disappeared into the night. Inside Blackthorne Castle, Elena sat alone near the fireplace in the library. She couldn't sleep. Sleep had become difficult ever since, revealing the truth. For 20 years, she had hidden her identity. For 20 years, survival had been her only goal. Now, everything had changed. The secret was no longer hers alone. Others knew. Adrian knew. His officers knew. His advisors knew. Every passing day increased the risk. And deep down, Elena feared something else. Hope. For years she had survived by expecting nothing. No justice. No future. No happiness. But now she found herself imagining possibilities. A future where the truth was finally known. A future where her mother's sacrifices meant something. A future where she no longer had to run. The thought terrified her, because hope could be taken away, just like everything else. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. She looked up. The library door opened. Adrian entered. His dark cloak hung over his shoulders. A sword rested at his side. You should be asleep. Elena smiled faintly. You sound like my mother. A rare smile appeared on Adrian's face. Was that a compliment? It depends. He chuckled. The sound surprised both of them. For weeks, every conversation between them had been tense, careful, guarded. Now things felt different, more comfortable, more natural. Adrian approached the fire. Still worried? Elena stared into the flames. Wouldn't you be? The Duke didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled softly between them. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. I believe you. Elena looked up. What? I believe your story. The words hit her harder than she expected. For 20 years, she had dreamed of hearing those words. Someone believing her. Someone accepting the truth. Not because of evidence, not because of proof, but because they trusted her. Her eyes softened. Thank you. Adrian nodded. You don't have to thank me, but I do. Before he could respond, a scream echoed through the castle. Both froze. Then another scream followed. Closer, louder. Adrian was already moving. His sword left its sheath in a flash. Stay here. Elena immediately stood. No. The Duke gave her a look. She ignored it. The third scream cut through the corridor, this time accompanied by the clash of steel. Adrian's expression hardened. They're inside. The realization struck them both instantly. Someone had breached Blackthorne Castle, and there was only one reason why. Elena. The assassins moved quickly. 2 guards already lay dead near the eastern corridor. Another bled against the wall. The killers advanced deeper into the castle. Every step brought them closer to their target. The leader signaled silently. Split. Search. Kill. The hunters obeyed immediately. Meanwhile, Adrian stormed into the hallway. Chaos greeted him. Soldiers raced through the corridors. Servants fled in terror. A wounded guard stumbled forward. Your Grace. What happened? Assassin. The guard collapsed. Adrian cursed. He already knew. These weren't ordinary killers. No ordinary assassins could penetrate Blackthorne Castle this easily. Someone powerful had sent them. Someone with resources. Someone desperate. Steel suddenly flashed in the darkness. An assassin lunged from the shadows. Adrian reacted instantly. His blade intercepted the strike. The clash echoed through the hallway. The assassin moved with frightening speed, but Adrian was faster. One strike, two, three. Then his sword pierced the man's chest. The assassin collapsed. Dead. Another appeared. Then another. The Duke fought like a storm. Years of warfare had forged him into something deadly. His sword moved with ruthless precision. Every strike landed. Every movement counted. Within minutes, bodies littered the corridor. Yet more attackers continued emerging from the darkness. Elena watched from behind several guards. Her heart pounded. This wasn't an attack. It was an execution attempt. Someone wanted her dead badly enough to send an entire team. The realization chilled her, because only one person would benefit from her death. The king. Elsewhere in the castle, Marcus Thorne led soldiers through the western wing. They intercepted 3 assassins near the servant quarters. The battle was brief, brutal, bloody. 2 attackers died immediately. The third attempted escape. Marcus tackled him to the ground. Soldiers swarmed the assassin. Within seconds, he was restrained. Alive, the general smiled grimly. Good. Back in the main hall, the fighting finally ended. The remaining assassins lay dead. Blackthorne Castle stood victorious, but victory came at a cost. Several guards had fallen. 2 servants were dead. Blood stained the stone floors. The smell of smoke and steel filled the air. Adrian stood, breathing heavily. His sword dripped crimson. A soldier approached. "Your Grace." "What?" "We captured one." The Duke's eyes narrowed. Alive. That changed everything. Minutes later, Adrian entered the dungeon. Marcus stood beside a chained prisoner. The assassin's face was bruised. Blood covered his mouth. Yet, his eyes remained cold, fearless, dangerous. Adrian stepped forward. "Who sent you?" "Silence." The assassin smirked. The Duke remained calm. "Answer." "Nothing." Marcus punched him. The prisoner's head snapped sideways. Still he laughed. Adrian crouched slightly. "You came for Elena." The assassin's smile widened. "Interesting." That reaction alone revealed enough. The Duke continued. "The king knows. She's alive." For the first time, hesitation appeared. Only briefly. But Adrian saw it, and so did Marcus. The assassin realized his mistake. Adrian pressed harder. "Who ordered it?" The prisoner remained silent. Then suddenly, his expression changed. Pain, sharp, violent. Blood spilled from his lips. Marcus cursed. Poison. The assassin had hidden a poison capsule inside his mouth. A common tactic among elite killers. He laughed weakly, even as death approached. Then he whispered something, so quietly that everyone leaned closer. One final secret. One final truth. The advisor. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What advisor?" The assassin smiled. "The king's closest friend." His breathing weakened. "The one who buried the queen." Silence. Then he died. The dungeon fell quiet. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The implications were enormous. The king's advisor, Lord Victor Harrington, one of the most powerful men in Valoria, a man trusted by the crown, a man whose name appeared repeatedly in Queen Isabella's letters, the same man connected to the massacre, the same man now sending assassins. Marcus looked stunned. My God. Adrian slowly stood. The pieces were beginning to fit together, and the picture was terrifying. This wasn't merely about succession. This wasn't merely about politics. Someone had spent 20 years hiding the truth, 20 years protecting a secret, 20 years eliminating threats. The conspiracy stretched far beyond the throne. far beyond the king. Powerful men were involved, dangerous men, men willing to murder children, and they were still in power. Adrian understood something important. Elena wasn't just in danger. Everyone helping her was. The game had changed completely. The following days passed under heavy security. Additional guards protected Elena. The castle remained locked down. No one entered without permission. No one left unnoticed. Yet despite the danger, something unexpected happened. Adrian and Elena grew closer. Perhaps it was necessity. Perhaps it was fate. Or perhaps both. Every evening, they met in the library, reviewing the Queen's letters, searching for clues, searching for names, searching for answers. What began as cooperation slowly became friendship, real friendship. For the first time in years, Elena laughed. Small moments, cat moments, but genuine ones. Adrian found himself looking forward to them. Her intelligence impressed him. Her courage amazed him. Most people would have broken after living her life. She hadn't. She endured. She survived. And somehow remained kind. One evening, while examining another letter, Elena looked up. Why are you helping me? Adrian paused. The answer seemed simple, yet somehow difficult. Because it's right. Elena smiled softly. That's not the only reason. The Duke stared at her. The firelight danced across her face. For a moment, neither looked away. Something changed. Something neither had expected. Neither had planned. The silence stretched. Neither seemed eager to break it. Then footsteps echoed outside. The moment vanished, but not entirely, because both of them felt it. The connection, the pull, the growing bond. Danger surrounded them. Enemies hunted them. The kingdom itself seemed ready to explode. Yet, despite everything, or perhaps because of it, their hearts were beginning to move toward each other, and neither knew where that path would lead. But one thing was certain. The king's hunters had failed. The truth was still alive, and so was the woman destined to change the fate of Valoria. The battle for the throne had only just begun. Winter slowly loosened its grip on Valoria. The snow that had buried roads and mountains for months began to melt beneath the warmth of early spring. Rivers flowed freely once again. Merchants returned to the roads. Villages reopened their markets. To most of the kingdom, life appeared normal. But beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. A storm of secrets. A storm of lies. A storm that threatened to destroy the very foundations of the crown. Inside Blackthorne Castle, Duke Adrian Blackthorne stood before a large map spread across a wooden table. Pins marked locations throughout the kingdom. Each represented a witness. Each represented a piece of the truth. And together, they painted a terrifying picture. Elena stood beside him. For weeks, they had traveled across Valoria, gathering evidence. The Queen's letters alone were powerful, but letters could be dismissed. Witnesses could not. They needed living proof, and they were finding it, un by un, piece by piece. The truth was emerging from the shadows. We leave at dawn, Adrian said. Elena nodded. Where next? The Duke pointed toward a small town near the eastern border, Raven Hollow. Elena recognized the name immediately. The old royal estate. Exactly. Years ago, the estate had belonged to Queen Isabella's family. After the massacre, it had been abandoned. Most people avoided it. Some believed it was haunted. Others simply wanted to forget. But Adrian had received information. An elderly groundskeeper still lived nearby. A man who had witnessed the massacre's aftermath. If anyone knew the truth, it was him. 3 days later, they arrived. The estate looked exactly as Elena imagined. Broken, forgotten, covered in vines and decay. The once beautiful manor stood empty beneath gray skies, its windows shattered, its walls scarred by time. The old groundskeeper welcomed them cautiously. His name was Thomas. He was nearly 80 years old. His hands trembled with age, his back bent beneath decades of labor, but his memory remained sharp. When Elena revealed her identity, tears filled his eyes. For several moments, he simply stared at her. Then he whispered, "You have her eyes." Elena swallowed hard. "My mother?" Thomas nodded. "And the queen." The old man lowered himself into a chair. "I never thought I'd live long enough to see this day." Adrian listened carefully as Thomas began speaking. The story shattered everything they thought they knew. "The massacre wasn't sudden," Thomas said. "It was prepared." Elena's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" Thomas sighed heavily. The queen knew something was wrong. Adrian exchanged a glance with Elena. "What kind of wrong?" The old man hesitated, then answered, "She discovered corruption." The room fell silent. Massive corruption. His voice lowered. Powerful nobles were stealing royal funds. Adrian's jaw tightened. Thomas continued, "They bribed officials. They manipulated trade. They controlled military appointments. And when the queen discovered the truth, his eyes darkened. They decided she had to die." Elena felt sick. Everything her mother had feared was true. The massacre hadn't been random. It hadn't been political unrest. It had been murder. Calculated murder. Planned by people in power. Thomas revealed more names. Several appeared in the Queen's letters. Others were new. Every revelation expanded the conspiracy. Every answer created new questions. And every witness confirmed the same horrifying truth. The Queen had been betrayed from within. The crown itself had turned against her. Over the following month, Adrian and Elena continued their journey. Across mountains, across villages, across forgotten corners of the kingdom. Witness after witness emerged. A former palace maid, an aging knight, a retired royal clerk. Each carried fragments of the same story. Together, those fragments formed a complete picture. A conspiracy spanning 2 decades. A conspiracy involving nobles, advisors, military officers, and members of the royal court. The deeper they dug, the uglier the truth became, and the closer they came to exposing it. By the time they returned to Blackthorne Castle, they possessed enough evidence to shake the kingdom, perhaps enough to bring down a king. For the first time, hope felt real. Elena stood on a castle balcony, overlooking the valley. The wind gently stirred her dark hair. Adrian joined her moments later. Neither spoke immediately. The setting sun painted the sky gold and crimson. For a moment, the kingdom looked peaceful, untouched by betrayal, untouched by lies, untouched by bloodshed. "I never thought we'd get this far," Elena said softly. Adrian smiled. "We're not finished yet." "No." She looked toward the horizon. "But we're close. Closer than either of them realized." And that was exactly why danger was approaching. Not from the king, not from the capital, but from someone standing much nearer. Someone Adrian trusted. Someone he considered family. Commander Richard Hale. Richard had served Adrian for nearly 12 years. They had fought together, bled together, won battles together. Adrian trusted him more than most men, which was precisely why nobody suspected him. Not even for a moment. The betrayal began with a letter. A simple, sealed letter delivered secretly to Richard's quarters. Inside was a royal pardon, a fortune in gold, and a promise: serve the king or die beside the duke. Richard spent the entire night staring at the offer. His hands shook. His conscience battled his fear. He knew what Adrian was doing. He knew the evidence was real. He knew Elena was telling the truth. But he also knew something else. The king was powerful, powerful enough to destroy entire families, entire bloodlines, entire houses. Richard had a wife, children, people he loved, and the king knew it. By dawn, fear had won. The decision haunted him immediately, but it was already too late. That evening, while most of the castle slept, Richard entered the archive room. The queen's letters were stored there. protected, guarded. Yet Richard knew every security rotation, every guard position, every weakness. Within minutes, he reached the locked chest. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside rested the evidence, the truth, the future of the kingdom, and the salvation of Elena Ashbourne. For several seconds he hesitated. Then he took the letters. The moment the chest closed, history changed. 3 days later, disaster struck. Adrian entered the archive room. Something felt wrong immediately. The chest sat slightly open. His stomach tightened. He crossed the room, opened it, and froze. Empty. The letters were gone. Every single one. His blood turned cold. No. He searched frantically. Nothing. The letters had vanished. Within hours, the entire castle erupted into chaos. Searches began. Interrogations followed. No answers emerged. Then a royal decree arrived from the capital. The timing was impossible to ignore. Adrian opened the parchment. His expression darkened. Marcus watched nervously. "What is it?" The Duke handed him the document. Marcus read, then swore. The decree declared Adrian Blackthorne guilty of treason. His title revoked. His land seized. His assets confiscated. All military authority stripped. Any citizen aiding him would face execution. The room fell silent. Elena stared in disbelief. "They know." Adrian nodded grimly. "They know everything." The stolen letters had reached the king, which meant someone had betrayed them. Someone close. Someone trusted. The realization hit harder than any battlefield wound. Hours later, another devastating report arrived. Royal soldiers were already moving toward Blackthorne territory. The king's forces had begun occupying Adrian's lands. Tax collectors seized property. Officials arrested supporters. Loyal soldiers disappeared. The attack was swift, merciless, efficient. The crown wasn't merely defending itself, it was erasing him. Within days, Adrian Blackthorne transformed from one of the kingdom's most respected nobles into its most wanted criminal. The Duke, who once protected the throne, had become its enemy. The betrayal spread rapidly. Some allies abandoned him immediately. Others disappeared. A few remained loyal. But fear was everywhere, because opposing the crown meant risking everything. One evening, Adrian stood alone in his study. Maps covered the walls. Reports littered the desk. Every message carried bad news. Lost territory. Arrested supporters. Enemy advances. The situation worsened by the hour. A quiet knock interrupted his thoughts. Elena entered. She looked exhausted, heartbroken, guilty. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, she whispered, "This is my fault." Adrian looked up. "No." "Yes." Tears filled her eyes. "If I hadn't come here, you'd be dead." Her voice cracked. "Your people are suffering because of me." Adrian stepped closer. "No, they've lost their homes. They chose this fight. They're being hunted. They chose loyalty." Elena lowered her gaze. Pain overwhelmed her. For 20 years she had hidden to protect others. Now history seemed determined to repeat itself. People were suffering because of her existence. People were dying because she survived. The burden felt unbearable. Adrian gently lifted her chin. "Look at me." Slowly, she did. "This isn't your fault." His voice remained firm. "The people responsible are the ones who murdered your family." The emotion in his eyes stunned her. "They created this, not you." For a moment, the world seemed to disappear. The war, the betrayal, the fear, none of it mattered. Only this moment. Only them. Only the truth. Elena realized something she had spent years denying. She trusted him completely. And Adrian realized something equally dangerous. He cared for her far more than he should. Far more than a duke, protecting a political ally. Far more than a friend. The feeling frightened him. because war was coming, and war destroyed everything it touched. Outside, thunder rolled across the darkening sky. Storm clouds gathered above Blackthorne Castle, a fitting omen, because the kingdom stood on the edge of collapse. The evidence was gone. The king had struck first. The duke had been branded a traitor. And somewhere in the capital, powerful men celebrated what they believed was victory. But they were wrong, because although the letters had been stolen, the truth still lived. It lived in the witnesses. It lived in the survivors. And most importantly, it lived in Elena Ashbourne, the last heir of the fallen queen, the woman they had failed to kill, the woman destined to challenge the crown. The war for Valoria had begun, and before it ended, the kingdom itself would be forced to choose between the throne it obeyed and the truth it had feared for 20 years. The first banners appeared at dawn. From the highest tower of Blackthorne Castle, soldiers watched as thousands of armed men emerged from the morning mist. Rows of infantry stretched across the valley. Cavalry units advanced along the hillsides. Archers occupied elevated ground. Royal banners fluttered proudly in the cold wind. The king's army had arrived, and they had come in overwhelming numbers. A heavy silence settled over the castle walls. Everyone understood what this meant. The crown had made its decision. There would be no negotiations, no trials, no chance to explain. The king intended to destroy Adrian Blackthorne completely. Inside the war chamber, tension filled the air. Maps covered the table. Messengers rushed in and out, carrying reports. Officers studied troop movements. Every face reflected the same grim reality. They were outnumbered, badly. Marcus Thorne placed a marker on the map. 20,000 soldiers. The room fell silent. Another officer shook his head. Perhaps more. Adrian stared at the map. His expression remained calm, but inside, he understood the danger. Blackthorne Castle was strong, one of the strongest fortresses in Valoria. Its walls had never fallen. Its defenses were legendary. But even the strongest fortress could eventually be overwhelmed, especially when facing an enemy twice its size. Elena stood near the window. The sight of the royal army filled her with dread. Thousands of men, thousands of lives, all because of her. She turned toward Adrian. You can still leave. The room fell quiet. Adrian looked at her. What? You can escape. No, Adrian. No. His answer came instantly, without hesitation, without uncertainty. The Duke stepped closer. If I run now, everything we fought for dies. Elena lowered her eyes. But people will die. His voice softened. They've already chosen. Outside the castle, the king's commander rode forward beneath a white flag, a messenger. The gates remained closed. The drawbridge remained raised. The messenger stopped several yards from the walls. Then he unrolled a royal decree. His voice echoed across the valley. By order of His Majesty the King. Thousands listened. The messenger continued. Duke Adrian Blackthorne has been declared guilty of treason against the crown. Boos erupted from the royal soldiers. The messenger raised his voice. If the Duke surrenders immediately, his followers shall be spared. The offer hung in the air. Every soldier on the wall waited. Every servant held their breath. Every citizen inside the castle prayed. Then Adrian stepped forward, standing atop the battlements, visible to everyone. The valley fell silent. The Duke's voice carried across the battlefield. I served this kingdom my entire life. Thousands listened. I fought its wars. I defended its people. I shed blood for its crown. The royal soldiers exchanged uneasy looks. Adrian's gaze hardened. But I will not surrender to thieves hiding behind that crown. Shock spread through the enemy ranks. The accusation echoed across the valley. The messenger turned pale. Adrian pointed toward the royal army. You serve men who murdered a queen. Murmurs spread. You serve men who stole a throne. The The crowd grew restless. You serve men who fear the truth. The messenger quickly retreated. The negotiations were over. War had begun. The first assault came before sunset. Thousands of soldiers charged the walls. Arrows darkened the sky. Catapults hurled massive stones. The ground shook beneath the assault. Yet Blackthorne Castle held. Defenders rained arrows onto the attackers. Boiling oil poured from murder holes. Crossbow bolts struck advancing troops. The first attack failed. Then came the second, and the third. By nightfall, hundreds of bodies littered the valley. The royal army withdrew temporarily. Inside the castle, cheers erupted. But Adrian wasn't celebrating. He knew the truth. The enemy could afford losses. He couldn't. The next morning brought worse news. The king had sent reinforcements. 5,000 additional soldiers. The siege tightened. The noose closed further. Day 2 began with fire. Flaming projectiles crashed into the outer defenses. Wooden structures ignited. Smoke rose into the sky. The castle slowly began to burn. Chaos spread. Servants formed bucket lines. Soldiers battled flames between attacks. The air filled with smoke and screams. Elena worked alongside everyone else. Despite Adrian's protests, despite the danger, she refused to hide. The people noticed. They watched as the supposed heir carried water, helped the wounded, comforted frightened children. Whispers began spreading. Perhaps she truly was different. Perhaps she truly cared. That afternoon, disaster struck. A section of the outer wall collapsed. Royal soldiers flooded through the breach. Fighting erupted inside the castle grounds. Steel clashed. Men screamed. Blood stained the stone pathways. Adrian personally led the defense. His sword moved like lightning. Every strike dropped another enemy. Every movement inspired his soldiers. The Duke fought not as a noble, but as a warrior. The kind legends were built around. Yet even legends bleed. An enemy spear narrowly missed him. A sword sliced across his shoulder. Pain exploded through his arm. Still he fought. Still he advanced. Still he refused to yield. Nearby, Elena watched in horror. She had never seen battle this closely, never witnessed such brutality. The cost of war unfolded before her eyes, and it broke her heart. By evening, the breach was secured. The enemy retreated once more, but victory felt hollow. Too many defenders had fallen. Too many friends would never rise again. That night, the castle mourned. Families cried. Soldiers sat beside dying comrades. Priests offered prayers. The reality of war had arrived, and it showed no mercy. The third day brought the worst. Before sunrise, scouts delivered devastating news. The royal army was preparing one final assault. Everything they had, all at once. Marcus studied the enemy formations. His face turned grim. This is it. Adrian already knew. If the next attack succeeded, Blackthorne Castle would fall. The defenders gathered in the courtyard. Hundreds remained, exhausted, injured, outnumbered, yet none retreated. None surrendered. Adrian stood before them, his armor battered, his cloak torn. Blood stained his shoulder, but his voice remained strong. I won't lie to you. The crowd listened. This may be our last day. Silence followed. But if we fall, his eyes swept across the courtyard. We fall, protecting the truth. The soldiers raised their weapons. Cheers erupted. For the first time since the siege began, Elena felt hope, not because victory seemed possible, but because courage still existed. Then the horns sounded. The final assault had begun. The valley erupted. Thousands charged forward. Siege towers advanced. Battering rams thundered toward the gates. Arrows filled the sky. The battlefield became chaos. Hours passed. The defenders fought desperately, but numbers slowly won. The outer defenses collapsed. Enemy soldiers reached the inner courtyard. The gates finally broke. The sound echoed throughout the fortress. Blackthorne Castle was falling. Marcus fought like a man possessed. So did Adrian. So did every loyal knight remaining. But it wasn't enough. The royal army continued advancing. Room by room, hall by hall. The end approached. Then something unexpected happened. A shout echoed beyond the battlefield. Then another, and another. The royal soldiers turned, confused. Thousands of people were approaching from every direction. Not soldiers, citizens, ordinary citizens, villagers carrying hunting bows, merchants carrying axes, blacksmiths carrying hammers, farmers carrying pitchforks, former soldiers carrying old swords. An entire sea of people surged toward the battlefield. The royal commanders stared in disbelief. What is happening? No one had an answer, because this wasn't planned. This wasn't organized. This was something else. The people had chosen. Word of the Queen's story had spread. Word of the corruption had spread. Word of the king's crimes had spread. And ordinary citizens had finally reached their limit. For years they had suffered. Excessive taxes, corrupt officials, starvation, injustice, fear. Now they had found a cause, a reason to fight, a reason to hope. The villagers crashed into the royal army's rear lines. Panic erupted. Formations shattered. Commanders lost control. The battlefield transformed completely. More citizens arrived every hour. Entire towns joined the uprising. Entire communities declared support for Adrian. What had begun as one duke defending his castle suddenly became something much larger. A movement, a révolution, a kingdom awakening. Inside the castle, defenders watched in amazement. The impossible was happening. The people were fighting for them, not because they were ordered to, not because they were paid, but because they believed. For the first time, the king's soldiers began retreating. Fear spread through their ranks. Many surrendered. Others deserted. Some even switched sides. The tide had turned, and everyone knew it. Far away in the capital, news reached the royal palace. The king listened as his messenger delivered the report. His face darkened with every word. The siege failed. Silence. The people joined Blackthorne. More silence. Several regions have declared support for the Duke. The king's hand tightened around his goblet. Cracks appeared in the metal. For years, he had ruled through fear. Fear had always worked. Fear had always been enough. But now, something had changed. The people were no longer afraid, and that terrified him more than any army. For the first time in many years, the king felt something unfamiliar. Panic, because he finally understood the danger. This was no longer about Elena, no longer about Adrian, no longer about stolen letters. The kingdom itself was turning against him. Back at Blackthorne Castle, the surviving defenders gathered in the courtyard as the enemy withdrew. The fortress still stood, damaged, burning, broken, but standing. Elena looked around at the exhausted faces, the wounded, the grieving, the determined. Then she realized something. The fall of Blackthorne had not destroyed their cause. It had strengthened it. The king's attack had exposed his fear, his desperation, his guilt, and now the entire kingdom had seen it. The rebellion was no longer a rebellion. It had become a movement built on truth, a movement built on justice, a movement powerful enough to challenge a crown. And somewhere in the capital, a frightened king stared at a kingdom slipping through his fingers. For the first time since stealing the throne 20 years ago, he began to fear losing everything. The capital of Valoria had never seen a day like this. From dawn, thousands poured into the city. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Blacksmiths closed their forges. Farmers left their fields. Nobles arrived in decorated carriages. Soldiers crowded the streets. Everyone had heard the rumors. Everyone knew something extraordinary was about to happen. The truth that had slept beneath the kingdom for 20 years was finally coming to light. And at the center of it all stood Elena Ashbourne, the lost heir, the daughter of the murdered queen, the woman who had survived when an entire bloodline had been erased. Now, she was returning to the very palace where her family had been betrayed. The irony was not lost on her. As Elena's carriage entered the capital, silence followed. Citizens lined the streets. Thousands watched. Many bowed. Others simply stared. Some wept. For years, they had known only one version of history. Today, they would learn another. Beside Elena rode Adrian Blackthorne, the Duke who had sacrificed everything: his lands, his title, his reputation, his safety, all for the truth. He glanced toward Elena. She remained calm, but he knew her well enough now to recognize the storm hidden beneath that calm exterior. Today would decide everything. If they succeeded, the kingdom would be free. If they failed, they would die. There would be no middle ground. Ahead of them rose the royal palace. Massive, ancient, imposing. For generations, it had symbolized power. Today, it would become a courtroom. The grand hall had been prepared. Hundreds of nobles filled the chamber. Military commanders occupied one side. Judges occupied another. Representatives from every major region of Valoria had arrived. Even foreign ambassadors watched from special galleries. The entire kingdom seemed present. At the far end of the hall sat the king, golden robes draped across his shoulders. The royal crown rested upon his head. His expression remained cold, controlled, confident. Yet beneath the mask, fear was growing, because for the first time in his reign, he could not control what happened next. The massive doors opened. Every head turned. Elena entered. The room fell silent. No fanfare. No royal announcement. Only silence. She walked steadily toward the center of the chamber. Adrian followed. Marcus Thorne followed behind him. Then came dozens of witnesses. Men and women whose lives had been shaped by the massacre. Survivors. Former servant. Retired soldiers. Forgotten nobles. People who had carried pieces of the truth for decades. The king's confidence visibly weakened because he recognized many faces that should have disappeared long ago. The High Chancellor rose. Let these proceedings begin. The hall became perfectly still. The Chancellor looked toward Elena. You claim to be the daughter of Queen Isabella. Elena lifted her head. I do. You understand the gravity of that claim? I do. The Chancellor nodded. Then present your evidence. Elena stepped forward. For a brief moment, she saw her mother's face in her memory. The woman who had spent her life protecting this secret. The woman who had died waiting for justice. Today was for her. Today was for everyone who never lived long enough to see the truth. Elena began. My mother was Lady Catherine Ashbourne. Murmurs spread. The Ashbourne name still carried power, still carried memory, still carried pain. Elena continued. 20 years ago, she escaped the massacre that killed Queen Isabella. The king shifted slightly. His jaw tightened. The room listened. She spent the rest of her life hiding. Elena's voice grew stronger, not because she had committed a crime. Her eyes moved toward the throne, but because powerful men feared what she knew. Silence followed. Then the first witness stepped forward. Thomas, the elderly groundskeeper from Raven Hollow. Despite his age, his voice carried clearly through the hall. He described the days before the massacre, the strange movements inside the palace, the secret meetings, the growing fear surrounding the queen. One noble interrupted. Are we expected to trust the memory of an old man? Thomas looked directly at him. I watched innocent people die. The room fell silent. I have remembered every moment ever since. No one challenged him again. Then another witness stepped forward, a former palace maid. She testified about secret correspondence, missing records, disappearing servants, bribes, threats, murder. Another witness followed, then another, and another. Each testimony revealed another piece of the conspiracy, like pieces of shattered glass slowly forming a mirror. A mirror the kingdom could no longer avoid looking into. The king remained silent, but his knuckles had turned white. The nobles exchanged nervous glances. The atmosphere inside the hall shifted. Doubt was spreading. The official version of history was beginning to crack. Then came the documents. Boxes were brought forward. Records, financial ledgers, military reports, hidden archives recovered from across the kingdom. Every page revealed corruption, missing funds, illegal transfers, forged orders, evidence of a coordinated effort to hide the truth. The chancellor reviewed each document personally. His face darkened with every page. Finally, Elena revealed the most important evidence: the queen's letters. A murmur swept through the chamber. Many believed the letters had been destroyed. Many believed they no longer existed. Yet there they were, protected, preserved, alive. Richard Hale's betrayal had stolen the originals. But before they were taken, Elena and Adrian had secretly copied every letter and stored duplicates throughout the kingdom. The king visibly paled. For the first time, genuine panic appeared in his eyes. Elena handed the letters to the chancellor. The old man read them aloud. Un by un, every word echoed through the hall. The queen's fears, her suspicions, her discoveries, her warnings, and most importantly, the names. Names of the men plotting against her. Names of nobles who had betrayed her. Names of officials who had accepted bribes. Names of military officers who had turned their backs. Every name struck like thunder. Gasps erupted. Several nobles attempted to leave. Royal guards blocked the exits. Nobody was leaving. Not today. One by one, the traitors were identified. Several collapsed under questioning. Others confessed immediately. Years of lies crumbled within hours. The kingdom watched in absolute shock. Everything they believed was falling apart. Then came the final revelation. The revelation that changed everything. Elena slowly turned toward the throne. The hall became silent once more. Her voice echoed through the chamber. My family was not murdered because they were weak. The king stared at her. They were murdered because someone wanted their throne. The tension became unbearable. Elena raised one final document. A sealed confession, recovered from a dying royal accountant, protected for 20 years. Waiting for this moment, the chancellor opened it. His eyes widened, then widened further. The room held its breath. Slowly, he stood. His voice trembled. This document identifies the architect of the massacre. The hall exploded with whispers. The king rose from his throne. No, for the first time, fear entered his voice. The chancellor ignored him. The massacre was ordered by Lord Edmund Valmont. The room froze. Every noble knew the name. The king's father, the former regent, the man who had ruled before the current king. The chancellor continued. He arranged the murders. The silence became suffocating. He bribed members of the court. The king backed away from the throne. He orchestrated the destruction of Queen Isabella's bloodline. Shock swept through the chamber, but the chancellor was not finished. And after seizing power, his voice echoed like judgment itself. He placed his own son upon the throne. Complete silence, then chaos. The nobles erupted. Some shouted. Others demanded answers. Several openly denounced the king. Everything collapsed at once. 20 years of lies. 20 years of propaganda. 20 years of stolen power. Destroyed in a single afternoon. The king looked around desperately. His support vanished before his eyes. The nobles turned away from him. His allies lowered their heads. Even his closest advisors abandoned him. Then, something even more shocking happened. The captain of the royal guard stepped forward. The king looked relieved until the captain removed his helmet, then dropped to one knee before Elena. I recognized the rightful heir. The hall gasped. One by one, the royal guards followed, kneeling, lowering their weapons, abandoning the throne. The king stared in disbelief. His own protectors had deserted him. His kingdom had deserted him. His lies had finally reached their end. "You fools," he shouted. No one responded. "You need me." Silence. "You cannot do this." Silence. Because they already had. The crown no longer held power. Truth did. The king stumbled backward. The golden throne behind him suddenly looked smaller, weaker, meaningless. For 20 years it had symbolized authority. Now it symbolized theft. The chancellor stepped forward. His voice carried throughout the hall. By the authority of the high court, the room became silent once more. "The reign of King Alexander Valmont is hereby ended." The words struck like lightning. The crown had fallen. At last, justice had arrived. Elena stood motionless, not triumphant, not joyful, only emotional, because this victory belonged to more than her. It belonged to her mother, to Queen Isabella, to every victim, to every person who had suffered beneath corruption. And beside her stood Adrian, the man who had believed her when no one else would, the man who had risked everything. Together they watched as 20 years of darkness finally came to an end. But as the fallen king was taken away in chains, the kingdom turned its eyes toward Elena, because one final question remained. The throne was empty. The rightful heir had returned, and the future of Valoria was about to begin. The great hall of Valoria had never been so silent. Only weeks earlier, the room had witnessed the fall of a king. Now, it waited to welcome a queen. Sunlight streamed through the towering stained glass windows, casting golden patterns across the marble floor. Nobles, generals, judges, merchants, and citizens filled every corner of the hall. All eyes were fixed on one woman, Elena Ashbourne, the lost heir, the daughter of Queen Isabella, the survivor of a massacre that had stolen 20 years of her life. For 2 decades, she had hidden in shadows. She had lived under false names. She had slept in abandoned cottages, crossed dangerous borders, watched friends disappear, watched powerful men erase her family's memory from history. Yet somehow she had survived, and now destiny had brought her here. The empty throne stood before her, waiting. The throne that should have belonged to her mother. The throne stolen through blood and betrayal. The throne that countless people believed she would finally claim. The High Chancellor stepped forward. His voice echoed through the chamber. "Lady Elena Ashbourne." The room held its breath. "The High Court of Valoria recognizes you as the rightful heir to the kingdom." Thousands listened. "The crown is yours." A murmur swept through the crowd. Many expected Elena to walk directly toward the throne. Many expected her to sit immediately. Many expected celebration. Instead, Elena remained still. Her eyes slowly moved across the room. She saw the faces of survivors, the faces of grieving families, the faces of soldiers who had sacrificed everything, the faces of ordinary people who had risen against corruption. And finally, her eyes found Adrian, standing quietly among the nobles, as he always had, never seeking attention, never seeking reward, only serving, only protecting, only believing. The Duke who had stopped an entire army because something in his heart told him to listen. The Duke who had risked his title, his lands, his fortune, his future, his life for here, for the truth, for justice. Elena felt emotion tighten her chest because she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Without Adrian Blackthorne, none of this would have happened. She would be dead. The truth would remain buried, and the kingdom would still belong to thieves. The throne room waited, confused, curious. Then Elena did something no one expected. She turned away from the throne. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The nobles exchanged bewildered looks. The chancellor blinked. Even Adrian looked surprised. Slowly, Elena crossed the room. Every footstep echoed through the hall, toward Adrian, toward the man who had changed everything. The Duke stared at her, unsure what she intended. Then Elena stopped before him, For a moment, neither spoke. The entire kingdom watched. Then Elena smiled, the same smile Adrian had come to cherish during their long journey together. A smile that had survived pain, loss, fear, and war. Elena extended her hand. The hall became perfectly silent. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from love. When the entire kingdom believed I was nobody, her eyes glistened. You believe me? Adrian felt his heart stop. When everyone wanted me dead, she smiled softly. You protected me. Tears filled the eyes of many watching. When I had no home, her voice grew gentler. You gave me one. The Duke could barely breathe. Elena took another step closer. And when I had no reason to hope, she squeezed his hand. You gave me that too. The silence became overwhelming. Then Elena spoke the words that would be remembered for generations. I do not want this throne alone. The hall erupted into whispers. Adrian stared at her, shock written across his face. Elena smiled. Because every step that brought me here, she looked directly into his eyes. We took together. For the first time in many years, Duke Adrian Blackthorne was speechless. The greatest commander in Valoria, the man who had faced armies without fear, the man who had stared death in the face countless times, now struggled to find words. The crowd watched as Elena gently placed her hand against his. I love you. The confession echoed through the chamber. Simple, honest, real. Adrian's eyes softened. Every battle, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every danger they had survived together suddenly led to this moment. And he realized there was only one answer. The only answer his heart had known for months. Slowly, he took her hand. A smile appeared. Small, warm, genuine. I love you too. The great hall exploded with applause. Cheers thundered through the chamber. Nobles rose to their feet. Citizens celebrated. Even hardened soldiers smiled. For the first time in decades, hope filled the palace. Not politics, not fear, not power. Hope. Months later, spring arrived. Valoria had never looked more beautiful. Fields bloomed with flowers. Rivers sparkled beneath clear skies. Markets overflowed with life. For the first time in generations, the kingdom felt free. The coronation became the largest celebration in living memory. People traveled from every corner of the realm. Villages emptied. Roads filled. Cities overflowed. Everyone wanted to witness history. The cathedral bells rang across the capital. Thousands gathered in the royal square. Banners waved in the warm breeze. Children sat upon their parents' shoulders. Merchants handed out food. Musicians filled the streets with music. The entire kingdom celebrated. Inside the grand cathedral, Elena stood before the altar, no longer hidden beneath a black widow's veil, no longer running, no longer afraid. She wore a gown of silver and white, a tribute to Queen Isabella, a tribute to the family she had finally honored. As she walked forward, the crowd watched in awe. The High Chancellor lifted the royal crown, the same crown stolen 20 years earlier. The same crown now returned to its rightful bloodline. His voice echoed throughout the cathedral. By the will of the people, the crowd listened. By the judgment of the High Court, silence followed. And by the truth that has prevailed over darkness, he gently placed the crown upon Elena's head. I present Queen Elena of Valoria. Faye. The cathedral erupted. Cheers shook the walls. Bells rang. Trumpets sounded. People wept openly. At long last, justice had won. But the celebration was not finished. The chancellor smiled. One more honor remains. The crowd quieted. Elena turned, and there stood Adrian, dressed in formal black, looking every bit the noble hero the kingdom had come to admire. The chancellor's smile widened. Will Duke Adrian Blackthorne please join Her Majesty? The crowd immediately understood, and the cheering began all over again. Elena laughed. Adrian shook his head helplessly. Yet, he walked toward her anyway. The entire cathedral watched. The queen extended her hand. The duke accepted it, and before the kingdom they loved, they became husband and wife. The celebration lasted 7 days. 7 days of music, 7 days of feasts, 7 days of joy. But the true work began afterward, because rebuilding a kingdom was harder than winning one. Together, Elena and Adrian transformed Valoria. Corrupt officials were removed. Fear laws were established. Taxes were reduced. Trade flourished. Orphans received protection. Veterans received support. The families of those who had died during the struggle were honored publicly. Monuments were built. Names were remembered. Sacrifices were never forgotten. For the first time in generations, the crown served the people instead of ruling over them. Years passed. Peace endured. Prosperity returned. And Valoria became stronger than it had ever been before. As for Elena and Adrian, they remained inseparable. Partners in ruling, partners in life, partners in every challenge that followed. And though history would remember Queen Elena as one of the greatest rulers the kingdom ever knew, those closest to her often remembered something else. They remembered the woman standing alone in the snow, the woman everyone ignored, the woman everyone doubted, the woman who changed the fate of an entire kingdom. And every winter thereafter, when snow blanketed the roads of Valoria, parents gathered their children beside warm fires and told them a story. The story of a powerful duke leading 10,000 soldiers through a deadly storm. The story of a mysterious woman dressed in black, standing silently in the snow. The story of a single decision that changed history forever. Because had the duke ignored her warning, 10,000 men would have died. The rightful queen would never have returned. The truth would have remained buried, and the kingdom would have been lost. Instead, one man chose to listen. One woman chose to fight. And together, they gave Valoria a future. Their story became legend, not because they wore crowns, not because they won wars, not because history remembered their names, but because they proved that even in the darkest winter, truth can survive, hope can endure, and a single act of courage can change the fate of an entire kingdom.